the only show focused on stars' improvement strategies and the leaders who implement them. This is the Rising Stars with Rex Wallace Show, brought to you by Hyperlift.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Rising Stars. Today we are focused on more changes. So earlier this month, final rule came out, the newest final rule, and we're going to talk through kind of the current state and what the future state looks like. First, I want to bring on my co-host Mick Twomey. Mick, welcome back.
Thanks, sir.
You a little under the weather today? You okay?
A little under the weather, yeah. So the voice probably gives it away it's at.
It's got that raspy sound. I like it. And then let's go and bring our guest in, Hayley Rogers. So Hayley is a consulting actuary from Milliman. We've gotten to know Hayley well over the past few months, right? And we've known her for a while because of her fantastic white papers that on star ratings that she publishes. We see them on LinkedIn and on the Milliman website. So she and her colleagues do a really great job of crunching the numbers and projecting out future impacts of all these changes. So really helpful. We study them all as we come into today's episode. So Hayley, I hope you're ready for some verbatim quotes that we've got. But Hayley, I'll give you a second to do a little more introduction of yourself there if you want.
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Milliman for about 16 years now, and at the moment I'm leading a lot of the research within Milliman all around in general quality measures, but especially focusing on star ratings because of all the changes that are coming up. So leading a lot of the research to do with utilizing these like huge data sources we have to try and answer a lot of the questions that are out there, both around star ratings and value-based contracts. There's a lot of changes coming, and we just want to make sure that we can leverage this data, listen to all the concerns out there, see if we can answer these questions, see if we can help the general healthcare industry weather a lot of these changes that are coming. So it's a very exciting place to be, and I really appreciate you having me on the show today. I'm a big fan of the podcast.
Thanks. You're the one. You're the one. Okay. It's
Here's
great
the
to finally
one.
meet you.
We've been looking.
It's great to finally meet you. Well, yeah, and these are some of our favorite episodes where we, can your knowledge obviously is high regarding not just these changes, but the impact. And maybe let's tee this up by saying, there are an enormous number of changes in the last couple of final rules and final rate announcements. Many of them are they're all significant, right? Many of them are significant from an administrative burden standpoint, or new measures coming in, new individual measures like the new Part D ones that are impactful from a plan management standpoint, not necessarily as impactful on projected future star ratings or subsequent quality bonus payment revenue impact from those star ratings. Today, especially with you, we really want to focus on what are the most impactful changes. So we're gonna really dig deeper into the changes that are impacting just the finances and the stars.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and especially with these final rules, they really kind of piled up, and it was almost like there were final rules that happened before COVID, and then they were delayed because of COVID, and then they just kind of rolled out into this kind of big snowball effect that we see happening over time. And obviously the really big ones are including these or excluding these two key outliers in the cut points. And that's one that, the whole healthcare industry felt this last star ratings release. And that had a huge impact with a lot of star rating or a lot of contracts seeing them drop. And on top of that, there's a lot of other changes coming that based on kind of our simulated projections look like we're kind of only halfway there to the drop that you may have experienced during this last star rating period. And so the big ones coming are things like the CAPS and HEDIS measure shifts. That one alone, that creates a lot of movement at the contract level, but on average, it doesn't have a huge impact
Mhm.
on how much stars will drop. But the really big ones coming are the HEI rewards, and shifting from the current reward system that rewards you if you have kind of consistently high quality measure scores, shifting from that to rewarding contracts that have kind of the highest um, uh, level of care to these people with social risk factors, which at the moment are defined by being low income, dual, disabled. So just being able to reduce those, what they call disparities of care, and being in kind of the highest performers of that, that's how you'll get rewarded. And that's going to really hurt uh, these five, 4.5, 4-star plans that are benefiting from, potentially as high as a, half a point bump. And what we're seeing there is kind of once that comes into play, uh, that's going to drop it almost to the magnitude that we felt with the Tukey outliers in terms of kind of an average drop. And then
What?
obviously there's some that are going to benefit, that they don't currently have a reward and now they are going to have a reward, but it's going to really hurt um, those currently those contracts with high star ratings.
Yeah, during the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, right? Especially during COVID, with the disaster relief coming into play. At the same time, the weight changes up for the experience measures. One of the things, one of our kind of messages that we were talking a lot about was that it was creating this, we called it regression to the extremes instead of regression to the mean. So it forced the distribution right out from 3.5 and 4. We all of a sudden had many more 5-star plans than we've ever had before, and more 2.5-star plans than we've had before.
Mm-hmm.
And now with these changes, and you talk about this in some of your white papers, but in CMS definitely addresses it in their regulations. It's doing just the opposite. It's pulling everything to the middle. It feels like, right? So and I think even in some of your analysis that I want to dig into is, you're projecting, I think you said a significant number of 5-star plans will drop to 3.5, and many 4.5-star plans will drop to 3. But then, some 3 and 3.5-star plans that have never gotten a reward factor before will all of a sudden be able to, through the health equity index reward, jump up to 4. So it seems like everybody's kind of coming to the middle, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, and I definitely feel like based on what CMS is doing, it does feel very intentional that they're creating things like these Tukey outlier removals, that they're targeting kind of those low performing plans and weeding them out. And on the other hand, they're creating these other ones, like, yeah, the HEI rewards, but especially the proposed rule that can potentially penalize you if you're not continually improving up to 5 stars. So that's not finalized, but that one in particular is really going to hurt, or like bring people down to that 4, 3.5 consolidated period. So I definitely agree that it does seem very intentional, what CMS is doing. And to maybe clarify, I'm not seeing like a ton of contracts dropping from like 5 stars to 3.5. I think there's a kind of a handful that I see doing that, but
Okay.
those ones are also very large contracts, like they have over a million member or
Sure.
million
Yeah.
member months. Like they are very big contracts, so it can really affect the kind of average, when weighted kind of by membership, on like how this is going to affect star ratings and potentially how much CMS is paying out um, to these plans. So I mean, it is also intentional that it looks like
Mhm.
they're part of the motivation maybe for consolidating is to lower the payments that they're making out to MA revenues and or MAOs to increase their own savings.
Right.
Well, it's interesting when you look at some of these changes that you're going through right now. It's definitely more heavily weighted to the high performing, those 5-star contracts that are used to 30 and 40 basis points of reward factor every year. And probably more importantly, leadership teams are used to that bump coming in and getting you up to 5 stars. And with that going away, you don't have a lot of plans that are also going to max out the HEI reward to kind of replace, the impact that you had with reward factor. But then some of it becomes kind of a double dip situation in that after Tukey came in, for the first time in a lot of years, reward factor actually became a 4-star maker. Because with the thresholds down below, for the first time in a long time, you could be at 3.7, 3.72 and actually jump up to QBP levels. That going away is going to impact that, but more so if all of a sudden you're not held harmless at 4 stars with the QI measures, that's going to be that really significant double dip. So you're not getting reward factor, and you're having to actually use these 2 5-weighted measures. And I think that's going to be, the really drastic impact. The numbers, we've run numbers in the past looking at what that did to industry. You guys ran some numbers that were very in line with what we were looking at. But to me, that's going to be the most significant impact. But there are also tactics that you can apply to somewhat get ahead of that one. More difficult than trying to change your membership mix overnight to all of a sudden, meet an HEI. But at least with the QI, there are steps you can take.
Yeah, and just I guess maybe and Hayley, you alluded to this at the beginning, but just maybe mentioning kind of where we are, right? So 2024 stars, Tukey. Tukey came into play. Very impactful, obviously, right? For a lot of plans. And I think, one of the measurements there is I think like 30% of Medicare Advantage members are in a plan that dropped at least half a star because of Tukey, right? So so that's humongous, right? And then we have the weight reduction for the patient experience measures for 26 stars. That's going to be it's going to be significant. Health equity index is finalized. That's coming, like we said, the reward factor is going away. HEI is coming in 27 stars. And then the thing that is still pending that you guys have both alluded to is that hold harmless provision for the improvement measures, right? And Hayley, I saw in your one of your papers that, and we've seen, I know Mick and I have both crunched a lot of numbers around the impact of this and really studied the regulations. But you said something. You said the revenue impact from the hold harmless provision would be double all these other changes, which include Tukey. I mean, think about that, right? How many plans dropped with Tukey? How many plans lost QBP because of Tukey? And then you layer on losing the reward factor and replacing with this HEI and big weight changes and new measures. But this hold harmless provision is twice the impact of all of that.
Yeah, and it's really because it's focused on hitting those plans that are currently like 4.5, 4 stars, and those are the ones that are have kind of the most to lose from dropping a half a star. It's not gonna.
Yep.
You lose maybe like 1% of revenue going from 4.5 to 4 stars, but then about 5% of your revenue going from 4 to 3.5 stars. So that's a huge chunk of revenue, and that kind of makes up that massive projection that CMS put out in terms of their expected savings or MIO revenue reductions from if they finalize this. It could be huge for sure.
I mean, they were talking about what, 19 billion of that 25 billion that they were looking at savings was just based on that QI initially. They've pushed it back. And some of the numbers that you guys are pushing out now, it's over $2 billion a year.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up. But yeah, if it goes up to 5 stars, it would affect, about 4.6 million members, in terms of members that are part of health plans that would be losing, 5 to 1% of your revenue over I forget the latest, how much revenue is paid out to these people. Is it like 360 billion a year for MA revenue, something like that. But it's huge. And another kind of piece to put that into context is looking at, we also looked at the 2022 financial statements across, all the health plans that are filing their financials, and what's the actual revenue, or what's the actual profit these MA plans have. And in 2022, it was about 10 billion in total profit for the MA business. So putting that into context with how much this would say, CMS is projecting like 2.6, like that's just wiping out like almost like 30% of potentially profit for this MA space. So, putting it into that kind of context is, can be huge. And it can also be kind of deceiving when CMS puts this stuff out there, when they try and sell it as a percent of total revenue, and people are like, oh, it's not a big deal if it cuts out 0.1% of revenue. But it is a big deal because it focuses on a small cohort of contracts, and it's going to hit, and it's not spread out over everyone. And that's how they sell it, is it's a small percent of total MA revenue. But to these plans that are 4.5, 4 stars, it's going to really hit them.
Yeah, I mean, that one analysis that we were going back and forth on earlier, if like, I personally believe it's not, when it gets finalized, it's not going to go to 5 stars. I think there's going to be too much pushback. I think it'll go to 4.5. But even at 4.5, the only thing then you're saving is that rebate change. But the vast majority of the impact is the numbers that you guys ran. It was like, what, 32 contracts would have eventually dropped out of QBP with the total impact of $2 billion. So you think about that, $2 billion across 32 contracts, that's the really meaningful impact. And those are the ones, like, plans need to understand, kind of where do they fall in that likely risk category of being one of those plans, and what should you start putting in place right now to begin to get ahead of that, to try to sidestep that really significant negative impact to revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think I agree with you that it would be very hard for CMS to put it up to 5 stars, and potentially going to 4.5 is a compromise that they could get to. Because I understand that they're concerned that they see contracts maybe like getting to 4 stars and then becoming complacent. I have heard that some 5-star plans are like, well, is it really worth it to like be paying this much to maintain a 5-star versus what I get? And it's almost like maybe kind of a similar thing. Is it really worth them financially to like get to 4.5 stars? But as soon as you start kind of penalizing them for not continually improving, then it starts becoming more worth it to them. So I can see why CMS wants to increase that, because they are seeing a lot of complacency once contracts hit 4 stars, because the incremental increase in revenue isn't as much there for them.
I mean, for the contracts that we work with, the plans that we work with, at least I don't see a lot of complacency once you're getting to 4. It is always, all right, how do we get to 4.5? I mean, and it is, people are upset, if you're stuck in that 4.15 round, like, you're so close. So I don't know that at least I'm not seeing it personally, the complacency when 4 hits in. And because there's always this, you never know when a Tukey's going to come in. You never know when they're going to change the game. So anything that you can do to build some cushion in, so you can weather some of these storms and, at least put yourself in less risk. That's the kind of stuff that we're seeing. And Rex, I'm interested, like, you're agreeing with me, right? Like, you don't see a lot of.
No, and also just to clarify, I was careful to say CMS sees.
Oh no,
and I was with you there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in the final rule, that's how they justified it, as they were saying that they were seeing that. So I'm not.
But that's a good point of clarification.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there are some compelling metrics. We've got slides on it showing, from the regulations that CMS put out, how much room there is still to improve. There is still a lot of room to improve. I think the average for 4-star plan, hits 5 stars on just like 25% of the measures or something like that, right? Like there's still a lot of room to improve for 4 and 4.5 star plans. Like I completely agree with that. And I'm just thinking of our clients, and I agree that with Mick that I don't sense complacency, but I would say I think if this was in place, it would drive more innovation. And I do see a lack of innovation with a lot of health plans. Once they hit 4 and 4.5 stars, they're not all of them. We've got plenty of clients who still invest a lot every year because they want to stay ahead. They don't want to be flirting with 3.5 stars. They want to be 4.5 flirting with 4, not 4 flirting with 3.5, right?
Right.
But I think they would do even more if there was more at stake with this hold harmless provision. But yeah,
One
Go ahead.
One interesting thing with this whole idea of CMS wanting them to continually improve is also it's odd seeing how many measures there are out there where there's like almost no room to improve, but they still keep them in there anyways and then penalize them for, like the call rating centers where there's just like the like 1 percentage point between the cut points, and Elevence's whole lawsuit where they said, one call cost them, I forget what it was, $60 million or whatever it was
190,
that kind
right?
of sensitivity.
140, 190. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, whatever it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was crazy that, with this whole idea of continually improving, that it can be that sensitive to what they consider as continually improving, and that they would maybe even keep these in there is
Well,
crazy to
Yeah.
me.
and I think, where, a lot of the innovation that you're going to see, like Rex, that you're talking about, I think a lot of that innovation right now is going to come on the HEI side, because it is something that not everybody has put a real focus on. And, how do we change the access to care? How do we honestly offer better care, make it easier, more accessible to this population? But if the hold harmless rule changes, I also think you're going to see plans that just get much more focused on the nuance of QI. How do you think about that? How do you incorporate that more broadly into target setting? How do you start creating monthly targets to go after things? And so it's more, because so often getting up to that next QI threshold, a lot less than getting up to the next star rating. So if plans get more sophisticated kind of across the board on that, how do we specifically go after that? And it's more incremental change each year rather than going for, some more significant change. I think that's more likely to see, some of the changes that we see coming up.
Definitely. And I know that CMS has said they don't want people to, be strategic around these star ratings. They just want them to focus on quality. But with all that money at stake, it's impossible, especially with, how sensitive this can be between, millions of dollars at stake with just like a tiny error in a phone call it makes it impossible not to be strategic around it. One thing that I'm hoping, or that I'm encouraged to see, is this whole potential shift to the universal foundation measures, because I think that they're definitely hearing that it's getting too complicated, it's too administrative, like it's impossible to like coordinate this stuff with providers, across all the whatever they have. CMS has 40 different quality programs and like 500 different quality measures they're monitoring across all these different programs. Like it's just impossible to focus on quality when it's so administrative. And that's something that I'm encouraged with seeing, that hoping that if they can make it more simple, then maybe plans can go back to focusing on quality versus, being strategic around it.
Yeah, we talk a lot about stars being a math problem, and I mean, and even sometimes it's referred to as a game, right, to solve. But and it clearly is a math problem. And if you know the math and the formulas, it takes you a long way towards success, right? But I feel like, and I know there's plenty that's not a math problem. Like I'm imagining my pharmacy friends who are struggling to get adherence up one more rate and one more percentage, and trying to engage these unengageable members, et cetera. So I there's a lot of hard work under the math. Like, don't get me wrong, but I feel like HEI, it's it's I feel like it's transforming that. I feel like to be good at HEI, you have to know the math, but wow, we're taking these members that have been, underserved, oppressed, right, for generations in some cases, in many cases, like it's not just a math problem, right? Like, it's going to take foundational shifts in how we're identifying them, how we're approaching them, how we're gaining their trust that we clearly don't have right now. Like, it feels like it's just going to transform everything.
Definitely. And I think part of the motivation around that is, they adjust for, was it the categorical adjustment index, the
Adjustment
CAI?
index.
So obviously they normalize because they understand that, these populations are harder to serve and their scores are lower. So they've been normalizing it, but they've been normalizing it for so long. And I can't remember if it's basically stayed the same or even gotten worse over time because they're normalizing. And for, it's normalizing, allowing that population to continue to be underserved, which I think is has had the opposite effect of what they wanted. So I think that that's why they then turned around with these HEI rewards to start rewarding, so they're still normalizing for the population. But what I think that they want to see once they implement these HEI rewards is that normalization factor goes down. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what it does, how health plans serve those populations.
When we've talked about HEI, one of the things we've talked a lot about is, and we have a lot of clients asking us, and just a lot of health plans talk. What does this mean as far as if I don't have a lot of HEI eligible members, a lot of members with these specific social risk factors that fit into the HEI reward. So if I don't have a lot of LIS members and disabled members and dual eligible members, what do I, and I'm a 4.5 or 5-star plan now. What do I do? Do I just focus on the members I do have and just try to work even harder, knowing I'm going to lose potentially half a star because of the reward factor going away? Do I gain? Do I go buy a Medicaid block of business? Do I do I start some zero premium plans in 2025 to attract some lower income members? Do I launch a DSNP? Right, like lots of strategies there, and it's and it it needs to be based on more than just a star rating. I know, right? Like, or just the HEI index. Like, it's a big organizational decision, no matter what you do. And I'm curious, with those changes coming and with sort of all the other changes coming, Hayley, I know, I'm in a few bid strategy meetings every year with clients. I imagine if you're not in them, you're seeing the results of them and heavily, influencing them. Can you speak to what are you seeing for 2025 bids? How does it look different than in the past with all these changes?
Definitely. I mean, it has to be one of the craziest years I've been in. I've been doing bids for 16 years now, and I don't think I've ever seen as much uncertainty as I've seen this year in terms of, and I can't, I have to talk about things other than star ratings to kind of contextualize it, because it's not just star ratings, because, as we've said, a lot of plans lost their reduced their star ratings this last year. So they're going into it knowing that they're going to have lower quality payments. They're going into it with potentially lower rebate percentages to allow for to pay for supplemental benefits. And on top of all of that, there's, stagnant benchmark increases, there's risk score model changes, there's the IRA, which is, no one, I mean, we're doing our best, and we have this, insane model that basically uses, years of Part D actual member level data to estimate it, but I guarantee it's going to be wrong. Because it's just, how can you, it's crazy. But and so on top of all of that, plans are saying, trying to choose between margin and growth. Do we? I mean, I guess my clients are in a lot, and I've heard clients in a lot of different positions. Either they want growth, and so they're kind of chasing these really robust supplemental benefits that are already out there, and potentially having to choose, do I want to chase those benefits to grow? But on the other hand, maybe these bigger plans are seeing their numbers crunch and are saying, I'm going to cut back supplemental benefits because I don't want to lose a ton of money. So there's almost this like, you don't know what other people are going to be doing this year. Are they going to take a hit to their margin? Are they going to reduce supplemental benefits? Are plans that want to grow going to chase those benefits so it's not going to lower things across the board? What if they don't? There's so many questions in the air that it seems like people are. It'll be interesting to see like kind of who's going to be the first to blink, and maybe this is where CMS's expectation that supplemental benefits won't drop, at least not immediately, because they'd rather take a hit to their revenue than maybe lose that growth or lose that competitive advantage. But I certainly think over time, we can't sustain these, $1,200 free money flex cards that I've heard. So, some plans have said that they've seen, people buy cigarettes with them. I mean, it's just, they're like
Right.
bonkers benefits that I can't imagine will stay around, but we'll see. So I guess the theme is total uncertainty, probably the most I've seen, and even during kind of the ACA period. So it's a fun time to be a healthcare actuary, I guess.
Isn't it always a fun time to be a healthcare actuary?
When's it not? Yeah.
Obviously.
And in the final rule, I know we're talking just about the stars changes, but like you said, there's a lot more that Medicare Advantage plans are dealing with, right, as they're going through bid strategy. So, in the final rule also, lots and stars wasn't even the biggest thing, right? Like by far. So the big changes came from, broker compensation and utilization management and things like that. But supplemental benefits, and you mentioned this, I mean, going forward, based on the final rule now, lots of changes to that too, right? So now plans are going to have to prove that there's an ROI for supplemental benefits. They're going to have to use like cite peer-reviewed studies or do their own cohort studies to show that there's actually an impact for these supplemental benefits. Not, and then also do the mid-year communication to members who haven't used the supplemental benefits, and there's a lot. So that will all continue to change bid strategy, for the coming years. Not to mention the steady decline of the average star rating, right? And I think, Hayley, your analysis shows when you project it out, is it 2028 payment year? Where we're going to be lower than we've been since the demonstration period, right? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Those are just projections, but certainly, what I hope is that health plans are seeing this, and because that's kind of like, we'll be at that level if we continue on our current path. But what I'm hoping is, that we're reaching out and through all these different mediums to like, raise the alarm that unless we do something, this is where we'll be at. So fingers crossed that it doesn't actually get there, but yeah, that's kind of a projection of where things are at if we continue down this path. Yeah, the star ratings will likely be the lowest they've been since 2020 or 2014, which would be big for sure.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah. So what do we do? What do we? I know Mick and I are meeting with a lot of clients and talking to them about this, and have our take on some ways to mitigate this. Do you? And I know your day job is to is to analyze the data, right, and help plans understand the impact. But do you get into strategy? What are your thoughts there on strategy, on how they tackle this?
Oh, yeah. So I mean, obviously, my job is definitely strategy. And so in terms of
Oh,
everything that's
consulting
coming.
actuary. Sorry, I should. Right, that is the job.
uh, but yeah, I mean, and I think with all these headwinds, and I talked about plans deciding between margin and growth, and I think that could also be considered, or that for in some cases that's true, but in some cases I think that's almost a false choice in terms of there are ways to have strategy where you can have both. And I think, especially with these supplemental benefit um, design changes or, rule changes that you mentioned, I definitely think that there has to be almost a return back to kind of those core supplemental benefits that had kind of proven designs to, they were high visibility ones, they're the ones that are highlighted, potentially like $0 PCP copays, um, you know, generic drug $0 copays, like those things that are proven to um, reduce costs, improve health, versus things that are just these kind of free money flex cards that I think CMS is seeing uh, is that there's a lot of potential abuse around and waste around federal funding going to those kinds of benefits. So I'm happy that they're kind of potentially cracking down and making you kind of report all that information, prove that it's that it improves health. So I think so in terms of going back to strategy, and I know that this is kind of veering off star ratings, but it affects like how do you deal with lower rebates and revenue. And I think going back to um, potentially your what you're good at, and I see so often that plans try and chase those kind of united benefits, but it's more of like crack down, focus on what is not just supplemental benefits for marketing, because you can't just use supplemental benefits for marketing anymore. You have to, now that you have to remind them, they have to actually be used to for utilization management, improve cost, and then also just there's some really cool things vendors are doing out there that help with it's not just providing um, whatever uh, whatever service they offer, but they also are like have an ROI in terms of like improving risk scores, improving star ratings. There's just these really cool things vendors are doing out there, and it's fun to go to conferences. Um, so I'm just rattling off a bunch of things.
Yeah.
In terms of, and kind of going back to your thing about what do people do if they're losing their HEI rewards? Um, and what do they do about their populations if they're not even eligible for it? That one's an interesting problem because, it's kind of, you mentioned, like, they're like, what do we do? Do we buy, these other Medicaid business? Do we start like marketing to these underserved populations? But on the other hand, CMS is coming down by saying, by lowering the like dual lookalike thresholds, and in some states, I don't think you even can have like I think you almost have to have separate contracts for your D-SNPs and your
That's right.
non-D-SNPs. And so
Yep.
they're doing things like that make it so um, it's going to be really hard to be strategic around trying to get those dual eligibles in, and even get those HEI rewards. So it's tough, and I almost think that they want you to. I don't know what they want you to do.
Well, and it's a different, successfully managing that population is different. If you're not used to servicing that kind of population and you just bring a bunch in, there are going to be challenges and struggles that you face that that are going to be new. There's a reason that the contracts that focus on those populations maybe perform a little bit lower or have figured it out. But it's not just a gimme just because you're a high performing organization that means you're going to perform highly with that population as well. So there's some risk there.
Definitely. But I mean, it would be a good thing if these, high performing plans can start going into these counties that serve these, underserved populations and can take their good, their quality management of care to that population. It'd be great to see that. We'll see if they can. So
Hey,
Time will tell.
one last question from me, and then be thinking about if there's anything we've missed, and feel free to bring it up before we wrap. But size, right? So you had some good metrics. We've talked with we've done some studies and found correlations between the size of a health plan and the star rating, right? So basically facing the question, do nationals have an advantage over regional plans? And there is a correlation, and you pointed out too, right? I think you showed that even for 2024 stars, small organizations that are, the definition there is under 100,000 members, and 24 stars had the lowest average star rating of 3.95, and it decreased 23 basis points from the prior year. That's a pretty big average drop. So they felt the impacts of Tukey more than larger plans. When you're talking to your clients that are in that small category, assuming you have some, are you telling them anything different than you're telling the jumbo clients that you're working with? What would you share there? Any kind of
yeah, I mean,
guidance?
definitely the kind of those jumbo clients have, obviously they have like almost like a whole star rating department, right? And they have lots of tools that they've developed in-house that are very custom to their own company. And whereas these smaller plans, I mean, obviously they can't afford to have an entire department dedicated to improving star ratings, so they have to use vendors for help. And I certainly think that that's a really good thing. I think the last thing, or one thing I've seen some small plans do, and those are the ones that don't really succeed, is they just kind of hope if they just do well that they'll have good star ratings. And I haven't seen that to be the case. That unlike CMS says, like, you do have to be constantly kind of monitoring, responding to anything that you're seeing as you go, to be able to be smart about it, address any issues mid-year in order to make sure that you're not accidentally dropping to a star rate or a point, because that can be really hard to come back from. So I think there's definitely a gap there in terms of the advantage these big plans have versus smaller plans. But I think that smaller plans, certainly can match those bigger plans if they potentially reach out, because to certain vendors, because there certainly are um, people, I'm sure you guys work with maybe smaller plans, or maybe consult for larger plans to help them be kind of on the same footing. I'd be curious to know, like, if you see something similar.
I would say yes. I mean, there are distinct advantages for being large, right? I mean, scale with providers being a big one too, right? Like that you have to overcome. But there are ways to overcome that, creative ways, if you are smaller, to drive engagement with providers, to drive innovation internally, to have the right vendors, like you said, even if you don't have your own data science team, right? Having a predictive analytics vendor, that's just one example. But things like that, where there are ways to keep up and to
Yeah.
even be ahead, right? But it's not easy, for sure. No, you made some great points. Mick, would you add anything though?
I mean, I think every plan is different, and based on the size, you are going to have different access to different resources, entire departments of analytics versus maybe you've got a person over here that helps out. So it changes the game on what you need and how to go after it. And I think the people that we've seen success, have a thoughtful approach on how to go after it, how to fill those gaps where you don't necessarily have the resources to have an entire internal team.
Mm-hmm. Did we miss anything? Anything either of you want to bring up that we didn't talk about?
I could talk about star ratings forever.
We're going to get along so well.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. So Hayley, thanks so much. I enjoyed this a lot. I think it's great having somebody who yeah, their job is to study everything and look forward and understand, you know, where we're going, and help plans understand that as they're facing their bids and making critical decisions, you know, years into the future, right? So this has been a lot of fun. So we'll have to do this again for sure. But
Definitely. And I know that we've been starting to talk on the side, but definitely if anybody's watching, as I kind of said at the beginning, like we're getting access to these amazing data sets through CMS, almost like near live feeds with 1 month lag of emerging, you know, claims data, caps data. And I really just love talking to people and hearing, you know, what are the gaps in knowledge and research, what would help you, what kind of data or analysis would help you do a better job of improving your star ratings and monitoring. So we have a lot of fun things that we're doing with this data and with this analysis. So I always love talking like this or just listening to hear, um, yeah, where are those gaps there? If you had endless data, what would you want to, what kind of information would you want? And so, yeah, certainly with you guys, with anybody's listening, I'd always love to listen and hear what you have to say.
for sure.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I'll probably be calling you on that.
Perfect.
let's all go to dinner.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Hayley. We will we'll do it again, and great discussion. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this in the audience. So we'll talk next time. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.